Have you ever felt that strange pause like something was shifting, but you couldn't explain why? As if life momentarily held its breath, waiting for you to notice? That feeling isn't random. It's resonance. A soft nudge from the unseen, inviting you into alignment with something deeper than logic. So take a breath. Let the world fall quiet for just a moment. Wherever you are, on your bed, your couch, or walking alone under the sky, this is your space now. Nothing to fix, nothing to chase. Just a gentle unfolding of awareness. You're not late. You're not behind. You're right on time. Before we begin, be sure you're subscribed. These stories aren't just narratives, they're activations. And if you're listening now, it means something within you is ready. So stay connected. Other transmissions like this are already waiting for you. Tonight's story isn't fiction. It's a remembering. A soft journey into the quantum field where timelines shimmer and consciousness reshapes reality from the inside out. Where your inner signals echo through the unseen, magnetizing a life that already knows your name. This isn't about striving. It's about softening into the version of you that has always existed, just beneath the noise. There is something unusual happening right now. You may not see it with your eyes or hear it in your ears, but you can feel it subtle, like the shift in air before a storm, or the feeling that someone just spoke your name, though no sound was made. It's not just you. The field around you has changed, and so have you. What if this feeling is not confusion, but confirmation? Your timeline has already shifted, not because you forced it to, but because something in you aligned with a quieter rhythm. You didn't choose this moment by chance. You arrived because the frequency of your awareness rippled outward, and the universe whispered back. This is the part we often overlook. Reality isn't reacting to what you do. It's responding to what you are, to the silent code you carry beneath your thoughts. A signal made of emotion, memory, attention, and willingness. And when that signal shifts, so does everything else. What if the change began not when you noticed, but when you softened? Think about it. How many times have you tried to become the version of yourself you thought would be worthy? You organized routines like rituals. You chased clarity. You tried to be consistent, even when your spirit longed to be wild. And still, something felt just out of reach. But now, you're beginning to feel it. A soft gravity pulling you inward. A recognition that the future you once imagined is not waiting far ahead, but vibrating faintly here, layered inside this moment. What if the future isn't coming? Because it's remembering you? This isn't the linear progress we're taught to measure. It's not step 1, step 2, achievement unlocked. It's spiraling. It's quantum. It's the re-emergence of an identity your soul never forgot, though your mind did. And it's happening whether you try or not, because resonance doesn't require effort. It requires permission. You're starting to dream differently now, aren't you? Symbols you can't quite decode. People you haven't met yet, but who feel familiar. Landscapes that glow with the surreal logic of memory. These are not dreams. They're bleed-throughs. Glimpses of possible versions of you existing just outside your dominant focus. Could your dreams be echoes of the timeline already calling you forward? In quantum theory, the observer doesn't just watch the experiment, they alter its outcome. And so it is with life. Your attention isn't passive. It's a force. Your presence isn't neutral. It's creative. Every glance you give to a possibility either strengthens or dissolves it. That means when you start to believe in something, gently even before it exists physically, it begins crystallizing in the field. Not because of force, but because of coherence. Coherence is what happens when your thoughts, emotions, and energy agree with each other. And coherence is magnetic. So what happens when your inner world stops arguing with itself? Suddenly, what used to feel like hard work becomes motion. What felt impossible begins to organize itself. You stop asking how and begin listening to when, because energy moves in cycles. And when your energy is in harmony, action becomes a dance, not a demand. Most people never get to this point because they're addicted to urgency. They believe movement means progress. But you're learning to slow down. You're learning that stillness is not stagnation, it's magnetism. That the more still your energy becomes, the more precisely it reshapes the world around it. What if waiting isn't delay, but precision? Let's talk about resistance. That thick, invisible wall you feel just when you're close to change. Most people mistake resistance for a sign to stop. But resistance isn't a wall. It's a mirror. It shows you the part of yourself that still fears expansion. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Because once, expansion meant danger. You see, every pattern you hold, even the ones that keep you small, were once solutions. Strategies to stay safe, loved, seen. And the field doesn't judge them. It just reflects them, like glass reflects a face dot. So what if your fear isn't the enemy, but the gatekeeper of your becoming? This is emotional alchemy. The moment you recognize that every difficult emotion is sacred data. That sadness isn't failure. It's the body's way of recalibrating. That anger is the nervous system's way of reclaiming space. That numbness isn't emptiness. It's temporary stillness, waiting for safety to return. And when you stop resisting your feelings, you begin to speak the language of energy fluently. You start to notice synchronicities, repeating numbers, perfect timings, people showing up with messages you needed. You realize these are not coincidences, they are harmonics. Your field is becoming louder, clearer, more organized. Reality is listening, because you're finally speaking in its native tongue. Vibration. Could your awareness be the architect behind every so-called coincidence? So now, as you move through the day, you begin to sense the timeline that's already unfolding, not because you chase it, but because you embody it. You walk like the version of you who already knows. You breathe like the version of you who already has. You speak not to get, but to affirm, and things begin to feel lighter. Not because nothing goes wrong, but because you no longer identify with chaos. You see it from a distance. You choose differently. You shift not by effort, but by essence. What happens when your energy becomes more real than your past? The past will try to call you back. Old stories will flicker. Old emotions will ask for re-entry. But you're wiser now. You understand that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering who you were before you learned to abandon yourself. And so, you hold your past gently, not with shame, but with reverence. You begin to see even the moments of heartbreak as part of the initiation, the training ground for your current resonance. Could your trauma have been the tuning process for your transmission? Yes, because now your energy is precise, and precision is power. You may begin to notice how time no longer behaves the way it used to. Some days stretch endlessly, others vanish in a blink. You lose track of linear order, but somehow remember things that haven't happened yet. It feels disorienting. But it's not malfunction, it's metamorphosis. You're not losing your grip on time. You're becoming sensitive to the reality that time is not a line. It's a field. Could time be bending to meet the version of you that's finally listening? This is why you may feel lost even when you're on track. Why familiar places seem strange. Why silence feels louder. These are signals that your internal orientation is changing. Your compass isn't broken, it's recalibrating. You're no longer magnetized to what used to keep you small. Your nervous system is catching up to the frequency of your future self. What if confusion is a sacred sign of arrival? Your emotions are becoming louder too, not to overwhelm you, but to inform you. Joy feels unbearable because it's unfiltered. Sadness feels holy because it contains truth. Even your boredom is sacred It's your soul refusing to numb itself with noise. The veil between stimulus and spirit is thinning. You're no longer reacting. You're receiving. Could your discomfort be a doorway to deeper signal clarity? There is a version of you that lives in ease, not because life has become easier, but because you've stopped resisting what it's trying to show you. That version of you isn't perfect. They don't have all the answers, but they are coherent. Their attention, emotions, and energy all face in the same direction. That's why things feel smooth around them. Not because they control outcomes, but because they calibrate frequencies. Could coherence be the new definition of success? And then there are the strange moments you can't explain. You think of someone and they call. A song plays that answers your exact thought. You look at the clock and the numbers are in sequence. These aren't magic tricks. They're echoes. Your field is becoming so precise that it's brushing up against the architectures of possibility. You're beginning to witness your own signal bouncing back in real time. What if synchronicity is simply the feedback loop of a coherent soul? This is why old habits start to feel heavy. You might try to force yourself into past rhythms and find them impossible to sustain. Not because you're lazy, but because you're incompatible with outdated energies. Habits built from fear, guilt, or obligation will begin to fall apart, no matter how disciplined you try to be. Could the collapse of routine be a sign of energetic upgrade? At this stage, many people panic. They think something is wrong because the systems they used to rely on stop working. But this is a good sign. It means your operating system is evolving. Your previous strategies were built for survival, but you are no longer surviving. You're synthesizing, integrating, becoming. Could your disorientation be the body's way of exiting the old matrix? This process isn't always graceful. Sometimes it feels like grieving someone you used to be. You'll feel nostalgic for a version of yourself that played small because it was safe. You might miss the old dreams, even if they weren't meant for you. That's okay. Let those feelings move through you. They are not regressions. They're reverent goodbyes. What if grief is just the nervous system honoring the identity that no longer fits? And amidst this shedding, something new begins to glow quietly inside you. A sense of space where once there was urgency. A stillness that isn't empty, but fertile. You stop obsessing over what's next and begin sensing what's true. You stop chasing goals and begin magnetizing outcomes. Not because you gave up, but because you gave into alignment. Could your surrender be the most powerful choice you've ever made? This is when relationships begin to change. Not just with others, but with yourself. A quiet self-cruelty disguised as discipline. And you let them go. Not by force, but by noticing that they no longer resonate. What if self-love is less about belief and more about frequency? And others feel this too. You'll begin to attract people who meet you at the level of your energy, not your performance. Conversations deepen. Eye contact lingers. There is no need to impress, defend, or prove, because your coherence invites their coherence. You become a tuning fork for everyone. Around you, could your presence be the permission slip others have been waiting for? And slowly, you begin to reclaim your creative power. Not as productivity, but as presence. You realize your ideas don't come from your mind, they move through it. You don't chase inspiration. You create the conditions for it to arrive. You become less focused on outcome and more reverent toward process. Creation becomes communion. Could the act of creating be your way of conversing with the quantum? This is when you stop seeking signs and start becoming one. You don't need external proof because your inner world has become evidence enough. You no longer look for reasons to believe. You believe because you feel the resonance. And in that belief, the field starts to shape itself. What if faith isn't a mindset, but a magnetic signature? This is also when duality softens. You stop separating light from dark, good from bad. You see the value in contrast, not as punishment, but as precision. Every shadow teaches you the boundaries of your light. Every delay fine-tunes your clarity. You stop labeling experiences as tests and start calling them translations. Could polarity be how the universe articulates growth? And through it all, your body carries you, not as a machine, but as a compass. Every sensation is information. Every tension, an invitation. You stop overriding your signals with logic. You begin to trust that your body knows before your mind can interpret. You listen more. You rest more. You inhabit yourself. What if embodiment is the most advanced spiritual technology available? Now, something astonishing begins to occur. You feel the shift not just emotionally, but somatically. Your breath changes, your pace slows, your choices soften. You find yourself doing less, but accomplishing more. Because you are moving from the inside out, not the outside in. Could alignment be the true architecture of flow? You begin to sense the world differently, not as a collection of objects, but as a living field of intelligence, a fabric of awareness that responds to your mood, your thoughts, your expectations. You understand that the world doesn't just exist around you, it extends from you. Could your perception be the paintbrush of your reality? And so you walk more gently now, not because you're fragile, but because you've become sacred. You speak more slowly, not out of fear, but out of reverence. You no longer rush through experience, you invite it in. Life stops being a race and becomes a ritual. What if your entire life is already a ceremony in motion? You may find that your thoughts no longer form the way they once did. Instead of chasing meaning, they emerge with rhythm. Instead of spiraling, they stream. Instead of echoing worry, they arrive with stillness. This is not a loss of intellect. It's a shift in where cognition begins. From mind to field. From force to flow. Could intelligence be something you tune into, not something you produce? This is why silence no longer feels empty. Why being alone no longer feels like absence. You're not withdrawing, you're expanding. Because in quiet, the unseen becomes clearer. You can hear the undertones of thought. You can feel where an emotion begins in the body. You can discern which energies belong to you and which were never yours to carry. What if solitude isn't lack, but pure signal? You begin to treat your energy the way an artist treats their canvas, carefully, intentionally. You don't enter every conversation. You don't explain yourself to every doubter. Not because you're better, but because you're coherent. And coherence doesn't argue. It radiates. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are simply expressing understanding. Could boundaries be less about protection and more about precision? The paradox is, the less you grasp, the more you receive. When you no longer chase, you create a vacuum, not of lack, but of invitation. When your inner world becomes spacious, the field responds. And what enters your life no longer drips with effort, it drips with alignment. Could receiving be the result of frequency, not deserving? This is the birth of effortless magnetism. People sense something in you they can't name. They feel safer around you, though you say little. They feel clearer after speaking to you, though you offered no advice. This is because your field is no longer cluttered. It's attuned, clean, resonant. What if your most healing gift is simply your clarity? You begin to live less from plans and more from presence. You notice that outcomes arrive without deadlines. That desires materialize when you stop pressing. That ideas visit you when you surrender trying to invent them. Life moves like breath. Inhale, exhale, receive, respond, wait, welcome. Could your new strategy be softness? And you become more honest. Not in words alone, but in vibration. You no longer pretend to feel safe. You build safety inside yourself. You no longer feign joy. You create space for the truth beneath the numbness. You stop suppressing anger. You give it ceremony so it doesn't become a pattern. Could emotional honesty be the medicine that rewires the future? And now, something holy begins to rise within you. A strange, ancient remembrance that your life was never meant to be impressive. It was meant to be intimate. Not a display of mastery, but a dialogue with mystery. You no longer seek applause. You seek alignment, not to be followed, but to be felt. What if fulfillment was never about becoming impressive, but becoming transparent? This is when the divine polarities within you begin to synchronize. The part of you that builds, leads, protects, begins to harmonize with the part that listens, receives, allows. No longer opposites, they become partners. The sacred masculine and sacred feminine within you start to weave a new internal architecture. Could balance be something you embody, not something you chase? You begin to know when to rest and when to rise, when to hold and when to release, when to ask and when to trust. Action no longer emerges from panic, it emerges from presence. And presence gives rise to power. It doesn't need to overpower. It simply knows, what if mastery is the ability to choose stillness in motion? And your relationship with desire changes too. You no longer want to have something just to fix how you feel. You want it because your inner world is already in harmony with it. You're not using manifestation to escape your life. You're using it to extend your essence. Could true desire be the soul remembering its own architecture? The field around. You start responding before you speak. You think of peace and the noise softens. You sense clarity and the answer appears. Your energy enters the room before your body does. Not with force, but with a frequency that's no longer doubting itself. What if your presence is now your most powerful communicator? And now, as things unfold, you stop expecting perfection. You expect refinement. You know the field isn't giving or withholding. It's always calibrating. It listens not to your words, but to your steadiness. You don't beg for signs. You become the evidence. Could your life now be a mirror for others ready to awaken? This is when service begins, not from obligation, but from overflow. You stop trying to convince others. You simply live in a way that offers a new frequency. You lead not by instruction, but by coherence. You embody what you once tried to teach. Could your journey now be a transmission? And you notice that your body becomes a more sensitive instrument. It tells you when you're off, not with punishment, but with whispers, a tired breath, a tight chest, a restless heart. You no longer override these cues. You move with them. Your body is no longer a container. It's a compass. Could health now be defined by harmony between signal and response? Eventually, you stop trying to heal in order to be worthy. You begin to explore healing as a return to intimacy with your own field. You stop obsessing over becoming someone else. You start honoring who you've always been, underneath the noise. What if your highest self isn't somewhere else? It's your most unedited self? And from this space, even challenges become meaningful. Not easy, but meaningful. You sense how each difficulty arrives not to punish, but to purify. Each discomfort is a messenger. You receive it not with fear, but with inquiry. What is this? Teaching me about my signal? What boundary wants to be clarified? What truth wants to be seen? Could your struggle be the friction that reveals your shape? And when the world outside becomes chaotic again, as it does, you don't collapse. You recalibrate. You don't demand answers. You return to resonance. You know now that your inner stillness is not denial. It's leadership, the kind that ripples beyond what you can measure. What if your coherence is quietly reshaping the field for others? You understand now that nothing is random. Every moment you've lived was part of the attunement, even the detours, even the heartbreaks. They sculpted your signal, sharpened your sight, softened your stance. Every version of you has been walking toward this remembrance. Could your entire life have been the training ground for this level of precision? And so, here you are, not finished, not perfected, but finally aligned with the frequency of your becoming. And the quantum field, always listening, has already begun its response. Not with fireworks, but with flow. Not with drama, but with depth. Not with urgency, but with undeniable movement. What if you've already become the version of you were waiting for? You've likely begun to feel it in the small, quiet hours. That sense that your thoughts ripple, wider than before. That your presence lingers in rooms even after you leave. That others respond to you differently, more softly, more openly, as if recognizing something they cannot quite name. It's not performance. It's coherence. The field around you has become an extension of your remembering. What if who you are becoming is no longer bound to what you do? There's a sacred intelligence to the way your frequency has evolved. It didn't happen through effort alone. It happened through release. Through the moments when you let go of who you thought you had to be and touched the quiet truth beneath your striving. That truth didn't shout. It hummed. It pulsed. And you listened. Could surrender be the forgotten language of transformation? There's a softness to power when it's real. Not the kind that overpowers, but the kind that permeates. You walk into a space and change its rhythm. Not because you've trained for it, but because your energy no longer hides. It simply arrives, fully, gently, without explanation. Could power be presence without performance? You're beginning to understand that manifestation isn't a technique, it's a remembering. It's not about asking the universe for what you want. It's about allowing yourself to become a match to what you already are. You don't beg, you align. You don't chase. You harmonize. The field does not reward effort. It responds to resonance. What if desire is just recognition in disguise? And yet, the world may not understand. You might still encounter confusion, even resistance, from others. That's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be in tune with yourself. The more you rest into your truth, the more others will be invited, not forced to meet you there. Could misunderstanding be proof that you're no longer playing small? As your signal becomes clearer, the world around you reorganizes. Projects begin to flow. Ideas land softly, fully formed. Conversations open doors you didn't know existed. You don't need to figure everything out, because clarity no longer comes from control. It comes from attunement. And attunement creates acceleration. What if speed is a natural byproduct of deep stillness? Even your perception of contrast begins to shift. You no longer see discomfort as failure. You see it as refinement. Every difficult conversation becomes a clarifying mirror. Every delay becomes a timing recalibration. Every challenge is an offering asking you not to shrink, but to sharpen. Could discomfort be the sacred sculptor of your clarity? You realize now that alignment isn't an end state, it's a rhythm. You'll drift and return, contract and expand. And that's okay, because coherence isn't perfection, it's permission. The permission to keep coming back, gently, without shame, without reset buttons. Just deeper understanding. Could your return to center be more powerful than never leaving it? And your intuition, once a whisper, becomes a compass. You don't need proof before you choose. You feel your way forward. And when something doesn't align, you feel it immediately. Not as fear, but as friction. You don't override that signal anymore. You honor it. And because of that, life begins to flow with surprising precision. Could intuition be your most advanced navigation system? You no longer outsource your safety to circumstances. You've built it inside your own nervous system. You've made room for the full spectrum of your emotions without labeling them right or wrong. You've learned that sensitivity is not fragility. It's fidelity, the ability to feel truth in its purest form. What if your sensitivity is the system's highest fidelity setting? You begin to sense your own field as a living interface. The moment you shift your emotional tone, the feedback around you adjusts. People call, opportunities arrive, obstacles melt, and when they don't, you no longer panic. You understand that sometimes the field holds off not to punish, but to protect timing. Could your delays be sacred pauses, not rejections? This is when you stop trying to force doors open. You wait for the ones that open with presence. You walk only where there is welcome. You offer without obligation. You serve without depletion. Because everything you give now comes from overflow, not scarcity. You're no longer afraid of being empty because you know how to return to the source. What if service is sustainable only when sourced from your inner well? You begin to see how your presence is its own offering. You don't need to dazzle. You don't need to convince. You simply need to embody. And when you do, others feel it not in their minds, but in their cells. Your coherence reminds them of their own. That is influence. That is legacy. Could being deeply yourself be the most generous act of all? And now you feel the call rising, not a task list. Not a strategy, a pulse, a longing, a sense that you're meant to contribute, not to be significant, but to be synchronistic, that your coherence was never just for you. It was always meant to tune the field for others too. Could your personal transformation be the catalyst for collective remembrance? This is where your energy becomes catalytic. You don't teach by explaining, you transmit by existing. You don't persuade by argument, you magnetize through coherence. You don't lead from the front, you illuminate from within. You've stopped trying to pull people forward. You've become the gravity that invites them home. Could leadership be the art of walking in your frequency, no matter who follows? You see now how every timeline that once seemed unreachable was simply waiting for you to remember your own signal. The visions you dismissed as fantasies were never fantasies. They were blueprints. Now they begin to return, not as wishes, but as echoes. Memories of the reality already forming around you. Could every dream you've ever carried be a preview of your coherence? And so, as this remembrance deepens, you begin to feel less like a person inside a world, and more like a world expressed through a person. You stop asking the universe to give you something. You begin asking, how can I let it flow through me? The need to control dissolves. The need to protect relaxes. You've become the field. Could you be the embodiment of the frequency you've been searching for? You're no longer just aware of energy. You are energy in form. That knowing no longer feels abstract. It lives in your breath, in the way you open doors, in the silence between your words. You're beginning to feel what it's like to embody truth instead of explain it. You're no longer trying to broadcast a message. You've become the message. What if you were never meant to find your voice, but to remember your frequency? You've shifted from asking, what am I here to do, to what am I here to be? And in that shift, action becomes precise, no longer fueled by fear or validation, but by alignment. You don't chase momentum. You become momentum. The current flows through you, not as pressure, but as presence. Could your true purpose be the quality of your presence, not the quantity of your output? This is the alchemy of becoming, not a transformation into something new, but a return to something original. The essence that was always there, beneath the conditioning, the masks, the loops. You've stopped upgrading yourself like software. You've begun unveiling yourself like sacred art. What if awakening isn't a process of self-improvement, but self-revealment? You're no longer chasing quantum tools. You are the technology now. Your thoughts interface with the field. Your emotions modulate waves. Your body calibrates signal. Your awareness bends probability, not with effort, but with clarity. You're no longer the seeker. You're the activator. Could it be that your consciousness was always the advanced system you were looking for? You begin to understand that reality doesn't bend for those who control, it bends for those who harmonize. And harmony isn't passive, it's tuned. It's sharp when it needs to be, fluid when it's required. Harmony doesn't shrink or dominate. It adapts without losing itself. What if mastery is the ability to adjust your signal without abandoning your essence? You no longer resist the unknown. You've made peace with mystery. You understand now that clarity isn't always immediate. It's earned through attunement. The fog doesn't mean you're lost. It means the frequency is still adjusting, and you trust it, even when your mind still wants proof. Could uncertainty be the field's way of softening your grip? And now you hold paradox with grace. You can be powerful and soft, still and dynamic, open and discerning. You can hold grief without losing joy. You can hold longing without leaving presence. You've stopped seeing contradiction as chaos. You've begun to recognize it as the dance of wholeness. What if duality is not the problem, but the doorway? The way you relate to results is different now. You no longer use outcomes to determine your worth. You no longer measure success by timelines. You measure it by resonance. You ask, did I show up in truth? Did I stay connected to signal? Did I move from alignment? That is your new compass. Could outcome be less important than origin? Even time bends differently now. You notice how being fully present expands a moment, and how fear shrinks it. You see how joy makes hours feel like minutes. You're learning to stretch time not with clocks, but with coherence. The more you align, the more time becomes a servant, not a tyrant. What if presence is the true master of time? And you begin to realize you're not manifesting moments, you're magnetizing. Match. You don't need to force love. You radiate the frequency of intimacy. You don't need to chase wealth. You embody stability. You don't need to grasp for peace. You become stillness in motion. Could reality simply be responding to who you've decided to become? Your emotions now function like indicators on a dashboard. They no longer derail you. They inform you. When something feels off, you don't spiral. You scan. You sense the misalignment. You adjust gently. There's no crisis, just recalibration. You've become a steward of your own state. What if your emotional system is your most sacred navigational technology? You've stopped trying to be seen. You've started allowing yourself to be felt. Recognition is no longer about achievement. It's about resonance. People don't follow you because of what you say. They align with how you hold space. You've become a sanctuary, not a brand. Could your field now be your most authentic offering? You no longer seek safety in structure. You find it in signal. A structure can collapse, but a frequency, when clear, rebuilds everything it touches. You've stopped treating safety as something to lock in. You treat it as something you emit, and it reaches beyond you. Could your stability now be broadcasted, not protected? And with this, your perception of identity softens. You stop defining yourself by what you've achieved. You begin to define yourself by how deeply you're listening. Identity becomes fluid, not inauthentic, but spacious. You're not boxed in anymore. You're broadcasted out. Could you be less a role and more a resonance? You understand now that love isn't something you get, it's something you become available for. You don't chase connection. You clear interference. You don't force affection. You embody receptivity. Love now is a frequency you enter, not a reward you earn. What if love has been trying to reach you all along, but couldn't find your signal? And now, even when things fall apart, you don't collapse. You dissolve old shapes and allow new ones to form. You trust that form always follows frequency. You know that chaos doesn't mean something went wrong. It means something couldn't stay the same. Could dismantling be a sacred prelude to alignment? And so, you no longer resist evolution. You participate. You feel it in your choices, in your language, in your silence, in your posture, in your willingness to pause instead of react. You're not a prisoner of your past momentum. You are the architect of your next resonance. Could your gentlest choices carry the most quantum weight? The energy you carry now is not naive. It's refined. It knows how to enter a room and scan not for approval, but for truth. It knows when to speak and when to hold signal. It knows when to stay and when to step back. You don't need to know everything. You just need to remain attuned. Could clarity be less about information and more about vibration? And now, in this space between becoming and already being, you rest, not because you're done, but because you've remembered the rhythm. Life is no longer a race to the finish. It's a deepening of presence, a widening of awareness, a softening into signal. Could your next level require less effort and more embodiment? You are beginning to sense that this isn't just your life. It's a living frequency, one that echoes forward and backward through time, one that touches those you'll never meet, one that shifts timelines without needing to be seen. You've moved beyond personal evolution into field work quietly, becoming a stabilizer in the collective. Could your coherence be changing more than just your own path? This is no longer about proving your power. It's about living it so naturally, so softly, that it leaves no residue. You don't need recognition to know it's real. You can feel it in the way you move through discomfort without panic, in the way you release without explanation, in the way your silence now says more than words ever could. What if maturity is the ability to hold power without needing to be noticed? You've stopped looking for the next breakthrough. You realize now, you are the breakthrough, not as a climax, but as a continuity. Every moment you return to presence, every time you choose gentleness over urgency, you reinforce the structure of the future you're already walking into. Could consistency be the quantum signature of mastery? And when life offers tests, you no longer brace, you open. You ask not, why is this happening to me? But what refinement is being asked for? You meet resistance like an old friend, not a threat. Because you know by now resistance is only ever the edge of your current coherence. Could every trigger be a teacher pointing you to your next frequency shift? You've begun to rewire how you interpret challenge. You no longer see contrast as chaos. You see it as contrast pure. Signal, revealing what's out of tune. You use discomfort not to collapse into old stories, but to lean into your next resonance. Pain becomes feedback, not punishment. What if pain is just a frequency asking to be retuned? Your identity no longer lives in the rigid outlines of past roles. It moves like light, bending where needed, anchoring where true. You don't call. It's shape-shifting. You call it listening. Because each version of you is not a lie. It's a layer. And layers are meant to be loved, not ranked. Could your fluidity be your most authentic form? You find yourself drawn more to spaces that feel nourishing than impressive. You're more interested in resonance than reach. You'd rather have one moment of real alignment than 100 moments of surface-level performance. You've stopped trading your frequency for attention. Could true wealth be measured in how deeply you feel, not how widely you're seen? And when others don't understand this path, you no longer flinch. You no longer force. You offer space. You model coherence. You trust the field to do the rest. You've let go of urgency to wake others up. You've chosen instead to walk awake. That is the most powerful invitation of all. Could your example be the quiet spark someone else has been waiting for? The more you surrender to presence, the more time opens for you. A conversation becomes a portal. A breath becomes a ceremony. A quiet morning becomes sacred space. The ordinary begins to shimmer, because you're not just passing through time anymore. You're harmonizing with it. Could every moment be encoded with frequency, if only you slowed enough to hear it? You're learning to let your joy be unguarded, to smile without checking who's watching, to rest without apology, to celebrate without needing proof that it's earned. This isn't recklessness. It's resonance without resistance. You've dropped the need to justify your light. What if joy, without explanation, is the clearest signal of alignment? You understand now that awakening isn't a place you arrive, it's a rhythm you live. There are days when the signal feels strong, and others when static returns. But now, you don't panic. You recalibrate. You tune back in, again and again. This is devotion. This is mastery. Could mastery be your willingness to return without shame, without pause? And when fear arises, it no longer paralyzes. You meet it like a familiar pulse. You recognize its voice. You thank it, and then you choose. You don't fight the fear. You don't silence it. You simply don't let it decide. This is how you maintain your signal without suppression. Could your power lie in your ability to hear fear without obeying it? You've come to understand that the quantum field isn't outside you. It's woven into your body, your thoughts, your choices. You are not just influencing reality, you are emitting it. With every breath, every boundary, every moment of stillness, you're creating the shape of what's coming next. Could embodiment be the portal you've been seeking all along? You no longer need to collapse into intensity to feel alive. You've cultivated depth without drama, spaciousness without boredom. You can sit in stillness without fidgeting. You can listen without planning your response. You can feel without recoiling. This is emotional fluency. This is energetic fluency. What if true presence is the most advanced spiritual skill? And now you start to sense the collective differently, not just as a sea of noise, but as a field of longing. You can feel the incoherence without drowning in it. You know how to anchor when others are spinning. You've become the calm in someone else's storm, not by force, but by frequency. Could your nervous system now be part of the planet's healing? And you begin to trust subtlety. You no longer need huge signs to know you're aligned. You feel it in the smallest things, the taste of your tea, the air in your lungs, the space between thoughts. You've stopped demanding fireworks. You've become fluent in candlelight. Could gentleness be the highest refinement of your evolution? You now understand. You are not here to impress the universe. You are here to express it, fully, freely, unedited, without apology. And in doing so, you become the proof others didn't know they needed. Not proof that life can be perfect, but that it can be deeply, quietly, truly felt. What if your life itself is a permission slip for someone else to unfold? And so, you carry this coherence with care, not like a performance, like a pulse. You understand the responsibility of being a clear signal in a foggy world, and still you smile, you rest, you laugh, because even that too is medicine. Even joy too is a transmission. Could your ease be what the field has been waiting to receive? There comes a moment, often unnoticed, when the shift completes itself, not with a burst, but with a breath. You don't always know it's happened until later, when you realize you've responded differently, chosen differently, felt differently than you ever did before. That moment is not dramatic. It is quiet, but it marks the arrival of a new gravitational center within you. Could the most life-changing shift arrive so gently, you almost miss it? You begin to live inside an inner spaciousness that once felt unreachable. Not because your outer world is perfect, but because your nervous system is no longer negotiating safety moment by moment. You've taught it how to rest inside presence. That's the revolution. Not the changing of circumstances, but the changing of your default signal. What if inner peace isn't something you find, but something you stabilize? And you notice, there's no longer a rush to be seen, to be validated, to be chosen. You don't need the mirror anymore to remind you who you are. You are the mirror now. You hold your own gaze without turning away. You are no longer waiting. To become, you're simply revealing what has always been forming. Could self-recognition be more powerful than external approval? You don't avoid triggers. You meet them with breath. You don't flee from discomfort. You stay long enough to decode its message. You no longer seek to eliminate your shadows. You seek to integrate them. And in doing so, you stop fearing darkness altogether, not because you deny it, but because you've become skilled at navigating it with light. What if mastery is simply emotional fluency across all frequencies? You realize now that you're not just responding to life, you're emitting into it. Every thought you stabilize, every boundary you set, every pause you honor, these are not small acts. They are quantum ripples. Reality does not wait for your performance. It listens to your signal. And your signal has become coherent? Could your most sacred offering be the signal you keep steady? You no longer need to reach towards some distant version of success. You walk it, not because you've achieved everything, but because you've aligned everything. Your energy, your beliefs, your body, your presence, they speak the same language now. And so reality listens, not with delay, but with immediacy. Could your alignment now be more precise than any plan? And so, you don't chase your destiny. You don't even try to control it. You become a field through which destiny remembers how to arrive. And now, you're here no longer waiting to become, no longer chasing alignment, but resting inside it. The version of you once dreamed of isn't somewhere far away. It's breathing through you, speaking through your presence, vibrating through your smallest choices. You've remembered how to walk without rushing, how to listen without interrupting, how to feel without fear. The field knows your name now, not as a stranger passing through, but as a steady note within its greater song. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are precisely on time, because you are time, folding in on itself, meeting you exactly where you're ready to begin again. So take one more breath. Not to fix, not to strive, but to seal the remembering. The signal is strong. You are attuned. And this stillness humming inside your bones is not the end. It's the doorway. Let your next moment be shaped not by habit, but by frequency. Not by fear, but by field. Not by effort, but by who you finally allowed yourself to become.